What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we dive into another meta style deck demake. Today's deck is going to be mono black control. This one's going to be a little bit more interesting just because control decks, typically you need kind of some of the rares to kind of make it effective. I am going to try to just, keep it to the minimum, try my best to slim it down as much as possible. But with, like I said, most of these decks, it requires a lot more to kind of keep the board clean to help you kind of grind out games to hopefully win the game in the long run. With that being said, if you like the video, hit that like button, definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, you want to know when I post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. It puts a +1/+1 counter on the channel. And with that being said, let's just dive into the deck and let's just talk about it. All right, so here we are in the arena here with a mono black control deck. Now, I know, like, typically, I think the more popular deck that plays a lot of black is usually the Orzhov control, but we're going to go with mono black just because playing two colors is a little bit more expensive overall when it comes to card rarity and things like that because of the mana base. So keeping it a single color is going to be an advantage because we won't have to play as many rare lands to make up the difference when it comes to picking up, the additional color. So with that being said, what we're going to do here is what we typically do. We're going to go through the deck. We're going to kind of organize it based on rares and what is in the deck that is not rare. So we're just going to keep the commons and uncommons in the deck to kind of start off with our base list. So we're going to drag our stuff right. Do some cards good. Meathook Massacre as well. Tradition is there. We got Sorin. We have Wolf. We have Book of Despair. We have Blood on the Snow, and we have Hive Tyrant. All right, I don't know, for some reason I made two piles, so overall, not the worst. I mean, it could be better, but I mean, overall, compared to the other two decks that we've done previously, recently, this deck is probably not as bad as we kind of see here. There's 4 + 2 6 + 9 +4 is 13, 16, 18, 21 total rare and mythics in the deck. So definitely not a little bit on the cheaper side when it comes to the cost of everything, so you only have to really get 21 additional rare / mythic uncommons, mythics or rares, I should say, not uncommons. Uncommons are already in the deck. So this is definitely a good starting point. So we kind of want to look through our rares and kind of figure out, is there anything that kind of stands out as being kind of the card that we probably want to keep? And in this scenario, I think I actually want to keep the Meathook Massacres. It's such a good board removal spell because it gives -X/-X, and everything that would die on our side, our opponent's going to get pinged to life. Anything that dies on our opponent's side will gain a life. So I think this is definitely a card that's going to help us out in the long run. So I do think Meathook Massacre, out of all these, is probably the card we're going to want to keep. Then after that, I actually have a list already up to the right. We already have the Eye Twitches, which I feel like are a staple. We have the Shambling Gas, which are also a staple, I think, in mono black. There's another card that is new. It came with Kamigawa. I think it is called a Dockside Chef. Yeah, it's this guy here. It's a 1-mana 1/2 that we can tap 2. We can sacrifice an artifact creature and we get to draw a card. Kind of works like the Skullport Merchant. So I guess it's one or the other. Do you want to be a little bit lower to the ground, or do you want to have a little bit of a later drop? Get a treasure token out of it and have a 1/4 blocker. For the purpose of this, if we want to go a little bit cheaper, why don't we add the chef? And we'll kind of cut the Skullport Merchants. We'll put them in the cut pile just to kind of see how it plays out. Now the next thing we want is it's called the Vengeful Strangler. Let's see, where is it? This is a card that's from Crimson Vow, or is it Midnight Hunt? It's one of the newer Innistrad sets, but essentially it's a 2/1 for 2. It's a can't block, so it's not very good there. And when it dies, return to the battlefield under your control attached to creature or planeswalker opponent controls. And then the aura is called Strangling Grasp, which at the beginning of our upkeep, enchant a permanent controller, sacrifice a non-land permanent, then that player loses 1 life. So this is definitely an interesting kind of removal spell. It's a little bit on the aggressive side because it is 2/1, but if we have enough things that we can use to sacrifice our creatures, I do think this card is definitely going to be good in that sense. So I do think we want to add a couple of those. So we'll add in a couple copies of that. 3 copies I think is okay. So Novice Oculus is another interesting card. It's a common, it's a 1/2, but when it dies, we have to draw a card, but we lose a life in the process. So it's definitely an interesting card. It's maybe something we'll come back to. I'm not 100% sure if I want to add it to the deck. Another good card I think that I didn't have on my original list that I'm now looking about that I may want to add, a mana card or 2-mana card. It is whenever something dies, whether it's your thing or your opponent's thing, you get to draw a card, but it can only happen once a turn. Well, one, we're going to add in Fellslinger. I think that's a solid card. Fellslinger is going to be great with our creatures that we're going to sacrifice to the draw effect. Another card is this guy. So Morbid Opportunist. It's a 3-mana 1/3 that whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So definitely going to give our creatures that we may sacrifice value, and also things that would die on our opponent's side. Maybe they get aggressive and they want to attack in. also we get some value out of it. So I'm gonna add a couple copies of that. I think I'm only gonna add 2 just because it's kind of like a nice to have, but we don't need to have it. Another interesting card here. It's an artifact. Is a Circuit Mender. It is a enter the battlefield, we gain some life, and then whenever it leaves the battlefield, we get to draw a card. So even if it gets exiled, we're still gonna get to draw a card. We'll add a couple copies of those. This is another interesting card to have in the deck. Kind of gives us a little bit of value. Life gain's always very good. I think we get rid of the Predation. I don't think our 3-drop slot's getting kind of expensive, and I don't want too much. But to replace it, we'll add in a Malakir Rebirth, which is a 1-drop that allows us to get a creature back. If it ends up dying, you get to return to the battlefield at the cost of 2 life, and we can also play it as a tap land, so definitely good there. Deadly Dispute, I think, is another great card for value deck because we want to get as much value, which we already have our copies of for. And this is kind of like the one thing with mono black that I do think is pretty good for the flexibility, and that is the 2-drop removal spell. We do have a couple options. We currently have Infernal Grasp in the deck. Power Work Kill is another one, but it is limited to non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon creature tokens. You can go a little bit more expensive. You can do Hero's Downfall. It's definitely one of those things that as the player, you kind of pick what you want. And I think because we don't already have them, we're actually going to get rid of the Infernal Grasp because we have things that are going to cost us life. I think we're going to end up putting in some powered kills. I think that's the way to go when it comes to removal. If we get matched up against dragons, that's going to stink. But I don't think people play too many of the... Well, I guess angels can pop up here and there. And devils are here and there as well. But I would say demons are not really a big deal. Devils are really only for the 5-drop red removal spell. And then Goldspan Dragon is probably the most prominent dragon that's currently in the format, and possibly even the ones from Kamigawa, but Goldspan Dragon is probably the only thing that this is not going to kill, so we're going to add that one because we want to save a little bit of life. Let's add in a Warlock class. I think Warlock class is definitely a good enchantment spell for the deck. Keeps our curve kind of low. It has the ability to kind of like, if our creature died this turn, each opponent loses 1 life at the end of our end step, so that's good. We get to look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them into our hand, the rest into our graveyard. Kind of an effect that I think, I forget which Planeswalker has it, but decent effect there. In the first 7 mana, we can, at the beginning of our end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So any damage that they would take, they end up taking that, like almost essentially double the damage. So definitely a good card to have, kind of like a card to help us finish off. And then this is another interesting card that I think is like an okay thing, because if we're going to try to grind the game out, it's called Dog Pursuit. It's a 4-mana enchantment that at the beginning of our end step, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. So definitely a card that's going to kind of slowly drain our opponent if they can't remove it. And then other than that, we're sitting at 83 cards. So if we start removing all the rares as we kind of go down, I don't know if we're still gonna have to make some cuts, because I did change my list up from originally what I had. We're at 61 cards. So we're definitely almost there. I think I'll go down on the Circuit Mender. I'm kind of curious if I want to keep, so it makes it easier for you to view. I'm kind of curious if I want to keep anything or get rid of anything, but I think our deck is pretty good. I don't think the snow mana matters. So in this scenario, if you play if you're not playing, Blood on the Snow, I mean, there's no point really to play snow mana. So why don't we just make a cool basic swamp? Which one do I want to do? Kamigawa ones. Let's just do this one. I really like this one. It's one of my favorites. I'll just kind of get rid of all of the snow-covered swamps, and we're just gonna go up 18 times. I actually like the Field of Ruins in deck. I think that's definitely a good card to have. Just because if we're playing a slower game or we get matched up against an opponent who has like a creature land, this is definitely a good spot removal spell for that, and we get to get a land in the process, so that's definitely good. But I think this list is definitely pretty decent. It is definitely a little bit lower to the ground, I would say, overall. We're not doing super crazy things that you would see in a mono black deck typically, but it is something that could work. If you're on a budget but you want to play a little bit more in the control-y thing, Meathook Massacre could be that card that's a little bit tougher to get because it is mythic, as you don't get as many mythic rare wild cards. But I mean, depending on what you have, you can do a mixture of Meathook Massacres and Blood on the Snows and keep the snow mana, though without the Planeswalkers, which are kind of like really what the Blood on the Snows really try to get back for the mono black control player. It's gonna be kind of iffy with the Blood on the Snows, but I think this is definitely a good list that you can start with. With what we're working with. If you don't have as many mythics, having at least 1 or 2 copies of this is definitely good there. and you can just up the amount of other cards you have. I think, you know, oh, you know what? I forgot. We have eye twitch. So let's kind of take a quick look at my sideboard. All right, so let's say we're the Mascot Suspicions and the Confront the Past. Let me go to the lessons real quick. All right, I guess there's things that had the word less in it. So we have that. We have Inkling Summoning. No, not in the deck. It's in the sideboard. Come on. Yep, there we go. We have an extra copy of Necrotic Fumes. Environmental Science is always good. Inkling Summon, Pest Summoning. One extra copy. And then one Introduction's not too bad. And I think because we play actual removal in the deck, we don't need to add additional removal with the 5-drop removal spell. But like I said, this is definitely a good list we'll start out with. And you can, like I said, play around with the board removal, but I do think you need some sort of massive board removal in a control deck. Or it's gonna be a tough time because you only have so much spot removal. But let's just dive into a game, kind of see how it plays out. All right, see what we got going on here. Hopefully we get not a super aggressive opponent. Hand's not terrible, nothing too great. We don't have any ways to really remove our creatures, but I guess we'll keep as we can draw into stuff. I'll play like Eye Twitch turn 1. As it's a good card to kind of like hopefully throw in front of something. We can get Environmental Sciences if we're struggling to get our land drop. Shaman Glass is definitely very good there because you can also be a chump blocker, get treasure token out of it, or give something -1/-1. Our opponent's thinking about keeping their hand. They don't got any sleeves, which is kind of. Let me kind of slide up here. Let me block. Let me block their little pet. All right, got a swamp. Eye Twitch. Go. Tap land. Got it. All right, so we got our land. Let's go to combat. We'll attack for 1. Play another land. We'll play Eye Twitch, and we'll play a Shaman Ghast. All right, so they're playing enchantments. Probably is my assumption here. They got 1 mana, 2 mana. I guess they were thinking about what color they want it. Maybe runes. This could be runes. All right. So definitely they're building up a board. We'll just attack for 1, because if they play more than 1 enchantment... Oh, well, we had a... It's fine. We'll play this. We'll kind of leave some blockers back, just depending on how big it gets. It makes them maybe not want to actually attack. Dokami would come back afterwards. All right. So they're going to play a rune. If they have a rune. Well, they may not have a rune because... Sure. And they don't attack. All right, so this is definitely going to be tough because we didn't draw any spot removal, and that's kind of what we would need in this position because every enchantment now they play on that 4/4 is going to penalize us. So we're just going to sit back, and we're just going to drain. And that would have been the perfect opportunity because they were tapped out. So the spot removal would have been perfect there. Now they're thinking about what they're doing here. Maybe they don't have an enchantment. Maybe they're thinking maybe they draw a land and they want to play the Rune Forge Captain. Okay, so they played that, gives that trample. Draw a card. Commune with Spirits, okay. Alright. So they got like a way to load it back up and they draw their red mana source. Well, that's a bummer. Because we're being flooded. Man, not drawing the removal we need. We're probably going to lose in this position just based on the board state here. Because we're not going to be able to do enough damage to them. Plus, we don't have like a board wipe unless we draw a direct removal spell. But the thing is, like, Kami comes directly back. So it's like, that's the one problem. If we can't exile it, then it's coming back. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to draw a card. I need to draw. It's fine. All right, so can afford attack with 2 in the air, and say go. This is not going to be good because they can play a bunch of stuff. Like they can play all that stuff to the side there, and essentially get a bunch of +1/+1 counters. That's gonna suck. Yep. Put it on itself. But essentially, we got outvalued here. Also, they probably should have played it, unless they made. Well, I guess that made that cheaper. Did it cost 2? I'm partially confused. Like, I feel like they probably could have still played the Hollow Hunt and then played the other Naturalist and then be able to play another card. Unless I got the mana wrong in my head. Actually, maybe it did cost 2. Does this cost 2? That costs 2. They have 2 mana open. Just play your card. I mean, you have an enchantment. You're going to lose one. You're not going to be able to get both. Makes the most sense. You want to give something, you know, trample, put counter somewhere. I'll take 5. Yeah, we're not in a good spot whatsoever. That's not going to be... I mean, it can't block, which is the problem. We're just going to get out of here because we're just going to get life gain, so... And we are back to the deck. I mean, overall, the deck is an okay deck to kind of get you started in a control-style matchup. It is going to be one of those things that if your opponent has a very impactful deck that you get matched up against as you play this deck, it may struggle a little bit, especially if they can ramp up pretty quickly and get the board pretty wide if you haven't drawn like your board wipe like a Meat Hook Massacre. The one thing, like I said, with control decks, it's definitely one of those decks that gets kind of tricky when you get a little bit down into that budget form, as like the board wipes that exist currently in Mono Black are rare and or mythic. So not having as many as you normally would have in the full version is definitely going to be a little bit of a struggle, but if you can get the right balance of cards, slowing your opponent enough, and maybe tax them a little bit, you can definitely sneak out a win here and there. With that being said, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, you want to know post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. With that being said, I'll see you in the next video.